Good evening. It's time for us to go ahead and jump back into our through the Old Testament study that we've been going through. Last week, we kind of talked about some things that maybe haven't been brought out a whole lot, and maybe you've had some time to think on them and reflect on some of the things that we talked about. And hopefully it's made sense as we have been able to digest it. But what did we talk about last week? Who remembers? Yeah. You remember, Joshua? Mm-hmm. Okay. No, you're absolutely right. It's just a matter of remembering what comes after Kings. Help them out, Samuel. All right, the Chronicles account. Now, just so you know, we're not going to study through the Chronicles account. What we did last week was to make a comparison between the Kings account, the Chronicles account, and to kind of ask some questions. Why do we have the differences that we have? Now, what was it that we ultimately determined? The difference between the King's account and the Chronicles account. Not the differences, but why the difference. Anybody remember? Yeah, John? Hold on, the mic is coming. It is there. What you got?
Who it was written to and the time it was written, that has to do with when God dispersed certain groups of Israel at certain times, and then the prophets were sent to address those two different groups of people. And we talked about the two different groups.
Okay, all right, so the King's account really is a reflection of what group of people? Yeah, but the ones who, what, Joshua? Go ahead. No, we're past the point where the Amalekites are a part of the story. Really, remember the King's accounts. The overall thing about the trajectory of the King's account is what? Starting here and going downward, right? The King's accounts really begin where? Okay, it's really all about failure. That's exactly right. Where do they begin? Okay, hold on. Let's let some other people there, Joshua. Where do they begin? With Adam in... Yeah. Give me a book. Genesis. The King's accounts really begin in Genesis. It's the continuation of the story of the seed of Genesis chapter 15, and the movement of that history. And the King's account really becomes the climactic finish. And how does the King's account end? What do they do at the very end of Kings? Hold on. Yeah, Kelly?
The last king is taken into captivity. He's done, but then there's like a little glimmer of, but there was this other guy.
All right.
Got treated right. Maybe the seed will continue.
All right, very good. Is that what you were going to say, Samuel? Yeah, okay. So remember, when you get to the end of the story in Kings, the very last king in the story is who? I'm not talking about the last few verses of Kings. The story itself. Who's the very last king? Did I hear someone mumble Zedekiah? Okay, that was correct. A correct mumbling of Zedekiah, the very last king. What happens to him? Joshua? Mm-hmm. All right, very good, Joshua. He talks about how he takes over when his brother is taken away. So Zedekiah then is the one whose sons are killed in front of him, and then his eyes are gouged out. So that's the very last thing that he sees, and then he is taken away into captivity. At this point, it looks like what has now finally happened to the seed, that the line of David is over. It's finished. It's done. It's ended. We just watched the end of it. But wait. The very last verses of Kings are about a guy named, not Abraham, that's a good guess. Yeah, Samuel? All right, this guy named Jehoiakim. Yes, Joshua? Okay, all right, so Joshua, he says there's still a little bit of hope because Jehoiakim, and this is years after, Jehoiakim is raised up out of the captivity that he was in Babylon, taken from the prison, given a seat. All of this to say the story of the line of David is not finished. There's still something left. And yet the hope moving forward, is it going to be in the story from Genesis onward of the covenant with Israel and the law of Moses and all of that? Is that where the hope is now? No. The hope now is going to be focused where? Well, no, not necessarily. Well, the temple, but the temple only as the temple is connected to. Okay, Jesus, yes, that's the end-all answer for everything, right? But Jesus is the end of what? The line of David. The answer is now no longer in the covenant, in the law, in the people of Israel. The answer is now in the line of David as the line of David progresses, because the line of David is part of a people that are going to have an upward trajectory. And thus Chronicles focuses on this aspect of things. Whereas there's so much judgment and in all of the nature of the stories here, what you get is a different picture in Chronicles. Some of the major differences between the Kings and the Chronicles center on the fact that the King's account is about the downward trajectory into captivity and a loss of relationship with God, whereas the Chronicles account is all about the fact that these people who have lost their relationship with God are able to have it restored. Thus, the ending of the Chronicles account focuses not on their going into captivity, but it focuses on their what? Coming out of captivity. All right, hands down. I haven't asked a question, so no hands right now, okay? All right, thank you. All right, so this is the picture that we're supposed to see. And we know that it's not just an opening up and, taking kings and using kings, just another rival book of some sort, because where does Chronicles begin? Adam. The very first word of Chronicles is Adam. It's going all the way back to the same beginning of the Deuteronomistic history of Genesis and the law and moving forward. It takes you all the way back to Adam, and it doesn't tell all the stories. It does so through the genealogies and such, and it moves straight to the quintessential person in the line of David. Who is that? David, right? Is there anyone more quintessential to the line of David than David himself? And so really the story in Chronicles, there's a little blurb about Saul, but it moves into David's story. And David is the key central figure. And then David's reign in Jerusalem and in Judah. Remember Israel, the northern nation, it doesn't have a part to play. They said, what connection do we have with David any longer? To your tents, O Israel. What lot do we have with David from this point on? And they said, we remove ourselves from David. They remove themselves from the hope of God that comes through David. And that's where the Chronicles account is so vastly different. So, this is where we ended last week. Everybody remember all of this? Yes. Yeah. Yeah, they did say all that the Lord has said we will do, we'll be obedient, we'll follow the law, but they do not. Yes, Samuel? Okay, so Samuel said, King's kind of like is them falling into the ditch. Chronicles is kind of like them climbing out of the ditch. And to some degree, that's kind of a picture that you see. All right, so this is the whole thing about the Kings and the Chronicles. Very good. It's a good analogy there, Samuel. Way to think of that. This brings us really then to the point, and we're going to have some more to say about as far as the timeline coming out of the captivity once we get there. What I want to do, though, is to begin the preview of really the next section. We've gone into captivity. That's where they are, and we know that they what? Do they stay in captivity forever? No, they're going to come out. And so that's where we are right now. And to preview this and to talk about what's happening moving forward, we move to Daniel chapter 2. Last week, maybe that wasn't a discussion that is typically had, talked about Kings and Chronicles. I know there were some questions about that and such. We're going to get on to a lot more familiar ground tonight. There's nothing groundbreaking, earth-shattering, paradigm-shifting about anything we'll be talking about. This is the kind of stuff that I think we know. We've talked about a lot before. And this comes from Nebuchadnezzar's dream in Daniel chapter 2. So, who remembers what happens in Daniel chapter 2? Let's let someone else have a shot at this one. I appreciate your eagerness. Okay, Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. Anybody with titles over the section here would be able to get that, right? What's in Nebuchadnezzar's dream? Who remembers this? Yeah, Lucy? All right, there's a statue in this dream, right? Yes, thank you for that. All right. So, there, put a little crown on the top of his head here. All right, so you have a statue. Now, as this dream comes about, he has this dream, and what does he want from his people? There's, the royal people that are there to help him out in his court. Yeah, Isaac?
He was like, okay, I want you to predict this dream I had and what it means. But there's a twist. I'm not going to tell you what the dream is.
All right. So, this sounds an awful lot like the scenario with Joseph and Pharaoh, right? Pharaoh has a dream. We're supposed to be able to draw markers from one to the other to some degree and see how God works with the rulers wanders outside of the people of Israel, and he sends his prophets. He has his prophets there as well to help them. But when the Pharaoh, not the Pharaoh, now I messed myself up by bringing in the Pharaoh from Exodus. When the king has his dream, here's the difference. In this one, he's like, yeah, I'm not going to tell you what it is. Probably he's used to all of his counselors and wise people and such. They probably are yes men type of people, and he can't trust them, would be at least my assumption of what's going on here. I don't want to spend a lot of time with that. The fact of the matter is anybody able to determine what this dream means? No. Just like with Pharaoh and the Joseph story. So, what is Nebuchadnezzar going to do? Kill them all. You can't tell me what it is. You'll be executed until I find someone who can. So they start rounding everybody up. And who is going to be part of that rounding up? Yeah? Daniel. That's right. Daniel, his buddies, all of those. And he says, whoa, hold on there. Let's take just a second. Let's calm down. Give me an opportunity to tell what this dream, what the king saw and what its interpretation is. So, let's see. We are, once again, Daniel chapter 2. That's verse 16, where he asked to have some time given so that he could tell the interpretation. He goes to his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Who are they? All right, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So he goes to them, Rakshak and Benny, right? And he tells them about this. Let's see here. Verse 18, urging them to pray, to ask the God of heavens a mercy concerning the mystery, so Daniel and his friends would not be destroyed with the rest of Babylon's wise men. So, the dream is then revealed to him. All right. So, let's see here. What is then this dream? He sees this great statue. Tell me about the statue. All right, it had a head of gold. Okay. So chest and arms of silver. All right, and then what? Well, we're not there quite yet. What's bronze? And, yeah, the belly and thighs are bronze, has legs of iron. And then you get to an iron and clay mixture with the feet. What does that mean? What's that? Yeah, it's not a strong combo. Where is the combo? The feet of a statue. What is that? It's the foundation. It just simply means the entire statue is built on an unstable foundation. A foundation that is easily crumbled. Is kind of the picture, and I think why you see iron clay mixture down at the very bottom. So, let's talk about these metals. What can you tell me about these metals? Not individually, like, tell me the... Anyway, as you go down or go up, what can you tell me about these metals? All right, as you go down, you start up here, gold is very valuable, right? What about iron? Not so much. These all decrease in value as you go down. But what else? All right, they all get stronger. Gold is a very malleable metal, and then as you go down, they get stronger, I think is kind of the picture. Yeah, John? Yep. All right, so John said that as you go down, these metals here at the top are ornamental. You would use them for decorative purposes, and then as you go down, they are more utilitarian in their value. So those are kind of the pictures that we're supposed to see. More majestic and a lot less majestic as you go down. So this is the statue. Now, what does this then mean? There at the very top, what does he tell Nebuchadnezzar? Okay, you are the head. Is that how we usually think of it, though? What do we usually think? The head is what? Yeah, it's Babylon, right? So, is this just one of those things, one of those oversights that we've just been missing for all these years because of our basic assumptions? And we're like, oh man, look at that. I guess it wasn't a kingdom after all. He was talking about Nebuchadnezzar himself. What do y'all think? Yeah, for us to disassociate the king from the kingdom would be a disservice to the way that they thought of things. The kingdom is that which is under the king or ruled by the king. When you say that Nebuchadnezzar is the head of gold, everything that Nebuchadnezzar rules over is part of him as the head of gold. We have a disassociation that we make where there's a clear distinction between leader and what he leads over because I think of the way that our society works. Yeah, Lorraine?
Inferior to you.
Mm-hmm.
And then a third kingdom of bronze.
Yep.
And then in verse 40, there'd be a fourth kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And then in verse 44, it says, in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed.
Yep. So, interchangeably again, kingdom, kingdom, kingdom. In the days of those kings, there will be another kingdom. And it's important that we realize kingdom is just simply another way of saying kingship. There's going to be another kingship that's going to come. You know, the kingdom of Christ is not a spot marked out on a map with borders or anything such as that. The kingdom of Christ is what? All who subject to the king. It's all about the king and what the king rules over. The kingdom is the same thing as kingship. And that's the way that this is established here. Now, we're not going to move on from here because we're not done with Babylon necessarily and all of that just yet. Because there's going to be some, well, we'll move on from here in a second. We're not going to move all the way through this because we're only going to really get into the pages of the Bible, the Old Testament itself. They come to a conclusion during which of these? The silver, yeah. During the reign of the silver. So in this time, we have the conclusion of the Old Testament. It occurs in this time frame, which means everything down through here is it occurs in what's often called the intertestamental period. Other phrases, one that I kind of like better, Second Temple, Judaism during that time, which is going to begin here when they rebuild the temple. And then you have all of this time of the Second Temple literature and other parts of culture that are a part of that. So we'll talk about this. But we need to finish up this first. Does that make sense? All right, so just for fun, let's go ahead and at least just fill this out because we know who this is, right? Who is the silver? No? He'll come later. Okay, the Medes and Persians, it's okay to just call it Persian, because they become the dominant empire. It's an alliance between Medes and Persians that overthrow Babylon, and we'll talk about that. And they kind of blend together, and historically, outside of biblical discussions, it is the Persian Empire. What comes after them? All right, so after that, you have the Greek Empire, started by Alexander. Which one? The Great one, right? Yeah, Alexander the Great. And then, what comes onto the scene? All right. The Roman Empire or kingdom, same idea. So when this comes onto the scene, now we're set up and prepared for what? Yes, very good. Jesus. From the story, the dream, what are we ready for? All right, I didn't leave room to do a great stone. So, a great stone, not what? All right, it's not carved by hands. All of these are what? These are man-made kingdoms, right? They're man-led. They come about because of the things that man does. This kingdom is not made by hands, and what does it do? It hits the statue in the foundation that it builds itself from, which is not a good foundation, and what happens to the rest of that statue? Yeah, it shatters into dust and blown away. This is the vision. By the way, can you see why Nebuchadnezzar might have wondered a little bit about this picture? This is not just a dream, I don't think. I think it's a dream that's a vision, which means it's one of those that he wakes up and he's like, okay, this is really, really serious. The kind of dream I'm sure I have never had before, because I don't think that God has ever prophetically talked to me in a dream before. Therefore, I couldn't tell you. I would say, those dreams when you wake up and you're like, oh man, that was so real. Or that just, those. This, I have a feeling, is that to the nth degree. It's the type where he wakes up and says, this was a message from a God. I need to know what it was, what it meant. And this is a crazy dream, especially if it ends with the statue turning to dust and blowing away. And what does Daniel say at the very beginning? That head of gold is you. This is what's going to happen to you. So, Nebuchadnezzar then takes this. By the way, there may be, some people at least theorize, a strong connection between Daniel's chapter 2 and chapter 3. Why? What happens in chapter 3? There's a great statue that Nebuchadnezzar erects. puts up and says everybody has to what? Worship this statue. Why might he do that? Okay, well, we don't need to get into the story itself, but why might he put this statue up and say everyone needs to worship it? What's that? Okay, because the head is him, yeah. Yeah, John? Okay, potentially he's worried about the implications of the vision, whether he's going to lose his authority. Yeah, Jan? Okay, he does make the whole thing, yeah, out of gold. Right. Keep in mind, how often do you think you get a vision from a God? Does that happen every day? No. I think he gets this vision, and he's like, wow, I need to honor this God in some kind of a way. He gave me this vision. I'm going to now erect this statue in honor of this God that I don't know. And ironically, and I think it's highly ironic that doing this is actually a complete violation of what this God wants his people to do and causes the events of chapter 3 that we are so familiar with. Anyway, that's all on the side. All right, everybody remember all of this? Yeah, keep in mind, our focus right now ends around right here. Eventually, yeah, we'll talk about what happens. There's some key events, some things that are really important for us to remember. We mentioned not too long ago the Feast of Dedication, known today as what? Hanukkah, and that occurs during this time frame while the Greeks are in control, and we'll talk about the Maccabees and everything revolved around that. But let's go back to them in Babylon. Remember, where does God have his people at this point? Picture the map up here again, right? Okay, there are people in the land of Israel, there are people that are there, and there are people in captivity in Babylon. How long are they going to be in Babylon? 70 years. Remember, he tells them, just, settle down, take it easy. Remember in Jeremiah chapter 29 when he sends, and talks about the plans that I have for you, settle down, make life good where you are for the Babylonians who are holding you in captivity. All of that is part of that. So, they're in those places. God has given them prophets. Who are the prophets? Who's in the land? Jeremiah. Who's the prophet with the people? Ezekiel, right? Who's the prophet with the king? Daniel. So he has a prophet in each of the important places. He makes sure that that is the case through here, and Daniel is the one that's given to the king. So, as we move through, we're not going to spend much more time on all of that. I want to come to and talk about now the ending of Babylon up here. The ending takes place, does anybody know what year? Let me make sure I'm not skipping anything really important here. Joshua, do you know the year Babylon comes to its end? No? 722 is a good try because that's when Israel as a nation comes to its end. So very good. I'm glad you've got 722 rattling in your brain because that's an important date. But what about the Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon? All right, so Babylon comes to its end in 539. So, 539 BC is when the city of Babylon gets overthrown. And what does Nebuchadnezzar do when it's overthrown? What's that? He is not around. He has been dead. Yes, that was my trick question for the evening. Maybe not the only one. At this point, he's dead. You've had a couple, actually, in the line who are dead. And you come into chapter 5, and who is king? All right, are you saying this from the text, or? Okay, Belshazzar, yes. And I say that because here's the next question, I guess. Who is the king in Daniel chapter 5? No? Anybody know who the king is in Daniel chapter 5? Belshazzar? No, actually, he's not. It's a guy named Nabonidus. Nabonidus is the king when the events take place in Daniel chapter 5. So, why does then Daniel start off by calling this Belshazzar king? Seems a little odd, doesn't it? If Nabonidus is actually the king? What do you guys think? Yeah, Kathy?
Weren't they kind of like co-regents? I mean, Belshazzar kind of ruled. I think it was his father that really wasn't all that interested. Belshazzar was a son, I believe,
yes.
of, well, I call him Nabonius or whatever. And he was ruling because his father really wasn't all that interested in ruling. He was off looking at doing libraries and things, and if I remember correctly.
Yep. Yeah, Nabonidus had basically, even though he technically is the king, he probably hasn't been there, if I'm remembering correctly, for about 15 years or so. He hasn't been ruling. He kind of didn't want to do that whole job. He's left. He probably sees, pun intended, the writing on the wall, as far as what's going to happen to Babylon, before there was writing on the wall, actually. So he's out. Belshazzar is the one who is ruling, but he's really co-regent. He's the second in command. And so, what's going on this night? What are they doing? This one's not a trick question. This one's straight out of the text. What are they doing? They're feasting. Now, what is going to happen this night? We know the story, right? What happens this very night? Babylon is overthrown. The city of Babylon gets overthrown this very night. So now the question becomes, and I think there's two answers that could make sense here. Why, on the very night that Babylon is going to be overthrown, why does he have a great feast for 1,000 of his lords who are there together having a feast? I already told you there's a couple acceptable answers, so this is one of those times where the chances of my saying to you, no, I think that's wrong, is, greatly diminished here. So, I still could say it to you, but go ahead, throw out what you think. What you got, Kelly?
Is this the story where they were like feasting on the stuff that came from, like they were using the silverware and all the stuff that came from the temple? And so it's kind of like it's a cautionary tale of you better be careful when you mess with God's plans, because stuff can come to a screeching halt and you won't even know it. Because you don't have a party for 1,000 people when everything's rough and you think you're about to have a serious problem with your neighbor or the next power over. Like he thought things were going pretty good, and they messed with the wrong.
I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
Now, but that's one of the ways of looking at it. What is the case here? I mean, Babylon is overthrown this very night, which means before that, what has been happening? People don't just march up on a city and take it overnight, right? And I'm not asking for how it goes down. Yeah. Laying a siege, the armies are there. It's not like all of a sudden they just go under. The armies are there. Babylon is surrounded at this point. And all of the nobles have fled to the place that makes the most sense for them to flee to, because it's the strongest place that they have to bunker down and get through this, right? So, where have they gone? To the city, the impenetrable city of Babylon. So at this point, there's one of two things that are probably running through their heads. What are those? Yeah, Isaac? Okay, either we are safe because nobody, I don't care how many people are out there, nobody's getting in. And if they're feasting, what does that mean that they think about their rations? Yeah, we're fine. We've got unlimited rations in here. We're good. We're willing to feast. Even so, bring it on, right? You can't get in here, so we're not worried. That may be one thing, one side of it. What's the flip side of it? Okay, Maya?
Let's enjoy the last few days of our lives.
Okay, let's enjoy this while we can. As Josie just said, we're all going to die. That's the other thing that could be going through their heads, is the ending is here. We know that it's coming. We have limited rations, so what do? Eat, drink, and be merry. Let's live it up because the end is imminent. One of those two things might be the case. We don't know exactly which one's going on. All we know is that they are feasting. And then as Kelly brought out, they very specifically bring things from the conquered Israelites that were taken out of their temple, and they start using those. And what happens at that point? This is the cool part of the story. Yeah, Isaac?
Climbing the wall.
Say it again.
The writing on the wall.
Yeah, thing shows up, right? Holding a marker or something like that, and this hand just kind of starts writing things on the wall. So, verse 9 might be an understatement. King Belshazzar was greatly alarmed, and the color changed. His color changed, and the lords were perplexed. So, what do they then do? Let's get the wise men in here, and let's figure this out. Who is brought before the king? All right, Daniel. Which means, out of these 1,000 nobles and people here who were feasting, who wasn't? Daniel was not a part of this and a part of all of these festivities. So, let's see here. When you look at this, let's go verse 16. The king says, I've heard that you can give interpretation, solve problems. If you can read the writing, make known to me its interpretation, you shall be clothed with purple, have a chain of gold around your neck, and will be what? the third ruler in the kingdom. Well, that's weird. Why not second? Because he's second. His father is first, right? So you have 1, 2, and the best that he can give Daniel is number 3, because he's actually technically number 2. And so he says, you can be the third ruler. And Daniel answers, he's like, I don't care about anything you have to offer to me. What you have to offer at this point in time is basically meaningless. But he goes on to tell him what is there. The writing, verse 25, mene, mene, tekel, parsin. And this is the interpretation. What does it mean? Mene, what is that? Okay. All right. John was showing a balance, right? So this is the interpretation. God has numbered the days of your kingdom, as Jason was saying. Tekel, you've been weighed in the balance, and you are lacking. And Perez, the kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. So this is the writing on the wall tells them, which obviously where that phrase comes from, right? You can see the writing on the wall, or the handwriting on the wall, which lets you know this is the end. It's telling you this is what's happening. You've been weighed in the balance, and you are lacking. I don't have the time to go through it and talk about it, but given the things that they actually do with their god Marduk, and the king has to go before Marduk on an annual basis and those types of things, this is really cool when you're able to make some type of compare and contrast with the things that Marduk would say in judgment potentially, and then Yahweh says and follows up immediately with a judgment given to the king. Anyway, it's a really neat thing, and I'd have to go back and probably reread the paper that I wrote on this to remember all the details if you were inclined to ask me about it. So, I may need to brush up on it just a little bit. But it is fascinating, these connections that you find. So, he tries to make Daniel the third in command of the kingdom. Is he successful in that, though? I mean, he gives him the robe, everything else. Is he really successful in that, though? How do we know? Okay, Belshazzar dies that night. Who does not? Daniel remains as an advisor to the next group of kings that come in, right? If he is the third in the kingdom, does he survive the night? No. I think it's important that Daniel brushes all of this away, has nothing. He wants nothing to do with this. And that very night, Belshazzar, the Chaldean king, was killed, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom. And that brings the city of Babylon, the nation of Babylon, to its conclusion. Isaac, you were eager earlier to tell us. Can you tell us what happened that night? I'm assuming that's what you were going to say earlier when I said, when I cut you off and you sheepishly put your hand down. I'll give you your chance now.
So the Persians, they made like this canal, and then they tunneled underneath the walls, and then they just popped right up in the palace and said, "Hello, we're taking over."
All right, that is very, very close to how all of this went down. That's very good. I would just say there was some digging and such that was done, but instead of, they didn't really dig under the walls. They didn't have to, because what was already going under the walls? All right, the great river, right? And I can't remember if it was Tigris or Euphrates. I want to say Euphrates, which means it might have been the Tigris, but I think it's Euphrates. But it's already going under the walls. But of course, no one can go in through that, right? unless they did what? Unless you reroute the river. That's the digging that they do. They reroute the river to run another way so that it dries up, and once they've got it finished up, then they're able to then go into the city, going underneath the walls on the riverbed, which no longer has a river on it. So, easy way to get into the impenetrable city. Brilliant, actually, when you think about it, as far as just kind of thinking that way. And this brings then the Babylonian kingdom to its end. This begins the Persian Empire, the Medo-Persian Empire. It's a phrase you'll often hear because the Bible does stress that this is an alliance, two different groups, the Medes and the Persians. From just a world historical perspective, it's okay to think of this as the Persian Empire. I mean, ultimately speaking, they are the great empire of the day. And the world doesn't call them a Medo-Persian alliance or Medo-Persian. It's simply the Persians. They blend together eventually, and the Persians are, this is what it's known as, is the Persian Empire during this time. So, during the Persian Empire or the Persian Kingdom, what great event takes place? They take over, and what do? They say, hey, all of you people here in Babylon and other places, go back to your homes. Here's the decree. Go back. We'll even assist you in various ways and in various things. Go back to your land and do what you need to do. And so it's during this time that the first wave of return really takes place. Does everybody pack up and leave Babylon? Why not? Yeah, they have done exactly what God said to do. Trench in, right? Build yourself a life there. It's going to be 70 years. Do good for yourself and for the nation. And that's what they've done in Babylon. They have made themselves their own society, Jewish society that's there. Yeah, Kelly?
Going back would kind of like be going to an outpost too. Like it's going to be rough living for the people that go back, and that's not appealing to most folk.
Yeah. What's been going on over in the land? Not a whole lot, right? Tell me about Jerusalem. Yeah. Walls crumble. There are no walls. Is there a temple to bring them back to? No temple. They've got nothing really there in Jerusalem that is enticing a lot of people. They say our life is good here in Babylon. We've settled in. We've made a name for ourselves. We've made a life for ourselves. And they just simply continue living there. It's during this time that they begin to really build a reputation as people who are strong financially. And in banking and in things like that, they really establish themselves in that regard. And yeah, a lot of people don't actually return. And we're going to talk about some of these people who stay, continuing to work for the Persians. And I would imagine next week we'll probably, unless I realize that I missed something really important, next week we'll probably begin with the story of Esther. Because Esther and what other books take place post-return? You can just throw them out, Isaac. Ezra and Nehemiah. All of these are writings about events that happen after their return. What other book is, well, a lot of the, or some of the prophets are also post-return. And what other book that we've spent some time talking about recently? This one's not supposed to be hard. Not Kings, but Chronicles. Chronicles is a post-return writing, and meant to be talk about the way that God blesses those who repent and come out of captivity, because that's where they are in their society. All right. Any questions on any of this that we've talked about this evening? Yeah, Joshua? Well, I said at the very beginning, we're not going to be studying Chronicles. We just talked about the differences between Kings and Chronicles last week and talked about the importance of it. But we're not going to do a study of Chronicles itself. Remember, we're trying to make sure we're doing an overview of the history and the things that take place. So that's a very good observation, though. All right. Anything else before we close up? Okay. Well, let's go ahead, and you've already done announcements, so let's close up then with a prayer together. That's all about. Father in heaven, we thank you for the story of your seed, the story of the Savior that you have given, the story of Jesus. And as we see how the story unfolds, we are amazed at the way that you have orchestrated so many things. Help us to see your hand in the lives of so many, and to see your hand in our own lives as well. We thank you for Jesus, for that hope, that you did not give up on us, but that all of this happened for our salvation. We look forward to our reign with you in heaven. We look forward to being with you in a relationship with you for all of eternity. We thank you again for Jesus, our Lord, our Savior, our hope, and it's through him we pray. Amen. All right. Good class, guys. Thanks a lot.